Okay, well, I want to go fast because we don't want to take a minute too long. Leave the floor to the great Ismael. So I'm so excited to welcome you to us. I mean, we've been looking forward to your talk for so long. I want to give, yeah, it's amazing, amazing work that you'll be showing us, and great, amazing person, artist. I want to just give a few lines of background, and since it was so well written on your site, I'm actually just lifting from what you already wrote, but I just want to give you a little bit of background. So Ismael was born in Texas and got his MFA from CalArts, and using mutant practices, which he'll describe in detail in a minute, including digital photo collage, drawing, painting, sculpture, installation, and interactive site-specific projects. Ismael's work is inspired by his pluralistic upbringing on the US-Mexico border and living in Los Angeles. Ismael de Anda's III's works are often site-specific and inspired by the communities in which they're created and using locally sourced materials. De Anda was, or Ismael was awarded the 2010 Japan United States Arts Program Fellowship by the Asian Cultural Council and the 2017 Raila T. and John F. Lott Endowment of Excellence in the Visual Arts in an artist residency in Texas Tech. He received the prestigious 2019 California Community Foundation Fellowship for a Visual Artist. Ismael is a member of the Durden and Ray Gallery and is also represented by La Estación Arte Contemporáneo in Chihuahua, Mexico. Just to mention a few, and he has a wide range or a long list of national and international exhibitions, but just to pull out some of them, the last also AOC F58 Galleria Bruno, Lisi in Rome, Torrance Art Museum, La Estación Arte Contemporáneo in Chihuahua, the Museo del Arte de Sonora, Musas in Mexico, El Paso Museum in El Paso, Museo del Arte de Ciudad Juarez in Mexico, and on and on, Japan, Marfa, Texas, it goes on. So I just wanted to, before we get started, because I know I will forget this, I want to say two things. Please, we'll have question and answer at the end of the talk, but you could also at any time write your questions into the chat button and we will get to them. So Elizabeth and I will keep track of your questions. And also, I always forget this, but I want to quickly invite you or let you know of the upcoming talks. So just if I may share my screen really quickly. In 2 weeks, please join us for Daniela Lieja Quintanar. She's the chief curator at LACC. I'm sorry, I cannot talk today. And then we are following that with Mark Knight. And finally, Feels Good Man, the Sundance Award-winning film by Arthur Jones on Pepe the Frog and how that character was usurped by the alt-right. Okay, and now, without further ado, we welcome Ismael. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I'm very excited to be here. Yeah, let's get this party started. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to share with everyone a few images, some projects that I've done in the past, so you can just get a sense of the trajectory of my work. And during this process, actually, I've been honored to work with Professor Eugene Ahn and his web design students. And so actually, we've been collaborating, and for their online gallery, we've been developing a kind of an interactive online exhibition project, which I'll kind of bring up towards the end. But first, I'd like to kind of maybe introduce myself a little bit more, share a little bit, some of my artworks from the past, so you can kind of just see my thread of ideas and also how they kind of also lead up to this project that I've been collaborating with your faculty and students. So let me go ahead and bring up my images here. All right. So I'm going to start off with a project. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself. So I grew up in El Paso, Texas, on the border or gateway of Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. And then also growing up as well, my grandparents had a farm that sat directly on the banks of the Rio Grande River. And so like a few yards away, you know, you would see my grandparents' neighbors that were living in Mexico. So it was always kind of confusing for me kind of growing up, that you would be driving and, you know, I was in Texas and we'd take a left turn and then all of a sudden we're in New Mexico, and then we take a left turn and then all of a sudden we're in Mexico, and then we take another left turn and then we're in Texas again. So that kind of experience kind of impacted me kind of growing up, and it made an impact on my work, especially after I received my MFA from CalArts. So after I graduated, I was kind of thinking about how to continue my practice as an artist. And in art school, I had made friends whose you know, parents or grandparents actually were artists or had a career in the field of art. And so none of my immediate family members were artists. So I was trying to kind of figure out, you know, how to kind of continue this path. And so I started kind of just, you know, thinking about, you know, what were things that were kind of important to me that maybe would make my artwork more passionate, that would actually lead to kind of more exciting artwork. And so this is an image actually from the 2015 Sur Biennial that I was privileged to participate in. And so this is at the Torrance Art Museum. And so actually what I started to do is, you know, just kind of started to tap into my family's history. And so this is the first swing sculpture that I created in the background here, the green and yellow one. And then this is another one that I fabricated for this exhibition. So I was kind of thinking about, like, you know, what made me want to become an artist, you know, what was my artistic heritage. And so my grandparents' farm in Presidio, Texas, it was in the middle of nowhere. It was in the middle of the desert. And so, you know, this idea of like mutant practices, I think, started developing with that idea where they were in the middle of nowhere and they had, you know, they didn't really have a lot of money to maintain the farm. There wasn't any like mechanic shops around. So a lot of the farm machinery that he had were like these kind of mutant sculptures, and it looked like a tractor, but there was these weird things welded on there. I didn't know if they functioned or not. And so I think for me, that was kind of like my, what I consider or cite my first experience with sculpture as a child. And so actually in the front yard, they had this like a glider swing. And so one time I was visiting it, the farm and the swing, the house and the swing were both falling apart. But I was more sad that the swing was falling apart because I had a lot of memories kind of with this object. And I believe that my grandfather had made this with his hands. So I thought this is where my heritage came from. So later on, I actually realized that it was just like a prefab Sears and Roebuck swing, right? But, you know, with the, you know, the age of, you know, the found object, you know, I didn't have any problems with that. So I started kind of creating these swings. So I was kind of interested in this idea of a work of art that's interactive, that people could kind of actually touch and participate in. And I guess for me, that was one of the issues too, growing up, you know, trying to define myself as an artist and try to share with family members that maybe didn't really go to, you know, galleries or museums, you know, what is the function of an artist? So I kind of like the fact, you know, I was trying to think about this idea that maybe anyone could kind of participate in the experience or the process of, you know, an artwork. They could sit on it, and, or actually you have to rock your body with other people on the swing to kind of make it rock back and forth, right? And so, yeah, so I've been doing these projects that have an interactivity to them, that kind of call on other human beings to activate it. And just kind of where I grew up also too, I started, you know, realizing that I started becoming interested, or I had this kind of connectivity or notion in terms of, I guess, wanting to make artwork that kind of investigated relationships between people, and also that maybe investigated the movement of peoples. And so, yeah, so after this experience, I've been very lucky. So I've been invited to co-curate with Max Presnil at the Torrance Art Museum the next iteration of the Sur Biennial, so the 2021 Sur Biennial, which is scheduled for September. So stay tuned for that, everyone. So yeah, so let me show where my work started kind of leading to next. So actually, you know, so I kind of grew up in the Southwest. Growing up in the Southwest, I couldn't wait to leave there because, you know, like for me, growing up there, the desert seemed kind of like a barren place, but I learned to appreciate it more fully after I left. So I couldn't wait to leave kind of where I grew up. But then when I got to Los Angeles, of course, a lot of my artwork started being about the place that I had left. So I had this kind of distance of perspective, right? And so actually I'd already moved to Los Angeles, and I had gotten a fellowship to travel in Japan. And then when I got back, actually here they had an art fair called Pulse Los Angeles. And so I actually saw a booth for a gallery called La Estación Arte Contemporáneo, and it kind of intrigued me. And so I kind of found out that this gallery was founded in Chihuahua, Mexico. So the thing that intrigued me is Chihuahua, the capital city of Chihuahua, is about a 2-hour drive from El Paso, where I grew up. And so, so I started talking to the gallerist, which is Fernando Rascon, right? And Rocio Infestas, right? They're the curators and the of this gallery. So I started kind of talking to them, and it was interesting to me. So he grew up in Chihuahua, you know, so kind of a similar region where I grew up, right? But in Mexico. And so he went to a top art school in Mexico City, which is, you know, considered an art hub. And then he went to the School of Visual Arts in New York City, another art hub. But after that, he said he wanted to go back to Chihuahua and kind of start a contemporary art gallery, to start developing like a contemporary art scene in a community where he felt there was kind of more of a need for that. So I thought that was really exciting and intriguing. So I started collaborating with him, and he invited me to kind of do a show with the gallery there. And so actually they started developing these contemporary art festivals in the city. So when I first started working with them, there was kind of a lot of negative press in terms of violence happening in the city. And so one of my experiences with them was really exciting for me in terms of this notion of like the power of art and how it can kind of, you know, affect a culture or society or community. So when they started out this contemporary art festival, when I was first installing the work, the downtown area was totally barren. No one was there. And so the opening was a 3-day event. And by Sunday, I think they said like over the 3-day weekend, like 50,000 people had attended this event. People started coming out, inhabiting downtown, setting up their own food booths and kiosks and things like that. So I don't know. So that was a really exciting experience and experiment for me. And so this artwork is called Constellation Chihuahua. And so through this process, so this is the basement of, I guess, what was considered like one of the most notorious bars at the time. And I really like this kind of antiquated kind of stone basements. So I started creating this, I started making artworks that had like these kind of flying sculptures, right? So I like this idea that art can be about, you know, like boundless imagination. And like also science fiction is something that's kind of always influenced my work also too. So Gene Roddenberry, the creator for Star Trek, was born in El Paso. He didn't grow up there, but I kind of have been using that in my artwork, that this idea that El Paso, Texas could be the birthplace for this like futuristic cosmology. And so I started kind of creating these mutant sculptures. So it's a combination of traditional piñatas, and I actually work with local piñata makers in Chihuahua, and we kind of refashion them so they wouldn't catch on fire. And, you know, we cut out all these holes, and I work with assistants there. So I got to work with a lot of people and artists in the community to make this installation. And then we put LED lights in them. And so I like how this sculpture is trying to, you know, it's levitating within the space that it's in, or it's trying to burst, you know, beyond it. And, you know, Constellation Chihuahua. So constellation is like this heavenly body that's supposed to kind of give you guidance. So I was thinking about that idea for this contemporary art festival. And I was also interested in maybe utilizing kind of forms that people could recognize, but then, you know, transform them into, you know, into something else, right? So yeah, so I started kind of doing these artworks that had kind of like a levitating, flying, liberated aspect to it. And then also when I was working in Chihuahua, so I did a few different projects called Multiverso. So I did 3 iterations of that. Right, so this was another site in Chihuahua. So that was a cool thing about working with them. They had these really incredible spaces for me to kind of inhabit and do projects in. And so one of the things, though, you know, it's like another country. So I you know, started to have to kind of develop like ideas of how to present, you know, like these kind of large projects without having to maybe make large sculptures in Los Angeles and crate them and, you know, have to pay to transport them and see if they get through customs or not. So actually, this project is called Multiverso. And so these are actually, in Spanish, these are called boyas, or in English, they're called bots dots. And so these are like the plastic or ceramic discs that they place on the street to kind of direct traffic of people's, and, you know, and so so Fernando Rascon's father actually had access to these construction sites where there was kind of like leftover materials that were kind of used to develop the city. And so I started using all these, and I started spray painting these flowers on there. And so the flowers were actually metallic. It was like a kind of a decorative garden ornament that I found at the Home Depot in Chihuahua. But I liked that it was kind of curved and it kind of fit perfectly over these discs. And I thought it was kind of an interesting kind of way of creating a stencil. But also I was kind of thinking about people's notions about what art is. And lots of times, you know, people when they first make a painting, it's about beauty, or it's about, like these kind of pretty flowers, So I was kind of utilizing that, but most of these discs had like kind of like chemical crud on there. I didn't even, I used gloves when I was using this. I don't even know what kind of materials were on these discs, So I kind of transformed that experience into this piece. And so these were all discs that were from Chihuahua, right? And so I redid this project here at the Cerritos College Gallery. And so I was trying to actually get some of the original discs, right, to incorporate it in this project, right? But I had problems transporting them. So what I did is I actually contacted the California Transportation Department and got access to the local discs here in California. So then I did this, this other iteration of it. And so in this space, so there's this kind of this is for their window dressings project. And so there's this kind of there's like this blocky wall inside this exhibition space. So I started kind of doing this kind of spiral emanating from the edge, because I kind of consider the El Paso and Ciudad Juarez kind of like, I've been calling it like the hinge of the Western Hemisphere. So there's this kind of corner of this hinge. So I kind of placed the disc so they kind of are kind of wrapping around this kind of, kind of point of transformation, or like this hinge architecturally on this space. So then ultimately, actually I did a third iteration of this. And so this was at Durden and Ray. And so this was in November 2019. And then so for this final iteration, so this was actually a combination of the discs, both from Chihuahua and from Los Angeles. So they both kind of converged together in one place. And so I actually kind of created this pathway, so there's this opportunity or invitation for people to walk through the space, to be inside the space. And so this is, like downtown Los Angeles, like a vista of downtown Los Angeles. So I kind of like this idea of these discs coming from different places, converging, and then you could still, I guess, kind of traverse through this experience of movement, and then ultimately you could be kind of led. And discs were created and exhibited in Chihuahua and in Cerritos, and they're all coming to downtown Los Angeles. And then you could actually walk down this path, and you can look out the window, and you're in Los Angeles proper. And then also kind of like the swing sculptures, there's only enough room for a few people to sit on the swing. So there's this intimacy where you have to kind of crowd in with people. So the path kind of narrows, so there's a little less room towards the window. So if you want to look at the window, you have to kind of share the view kind of with other people, right? So Alex kind of mentioned, I was fortunate to receive a California Community Foundation fellowship. And through that, it allowed me to do a project in Rome, Italy. And so a lot of my artworks, are kind of ephemeral. And so this project that I did in Rome, Italy, called Neo Kichkemel. So Kichkemel is it's like a garment that peoples in Central America, South America would wear, but it was only over the shoulder. So people kind of know about like the rebosos or the ponchos, right? But these are just kind of worn over the shoulder. So I kind of like just the accent aspect of it, how it's just kind of like an accent. And I don't know, I'm just kind of wondering, like in my work also too, that sometimes I have this idea of kind of like index or indexical, where it's like an experience that can lead to a larger experience. I kind of draw on, kind of personal experiences where, my work comes from, but it's like meant to be an index to maybe larger ideas. So let me see here. So this is the entrance to the installation in Rome, right? So these are all made out of paper and fabric also too. And so I don't know, for me, these triangular or geometric kind of fabric pieces kind of reminded me of like fashion that I would see like in Jetsons cartoons or Star Trek. And so I decided to kind of, make like a 21st century kind of version of this, being inspired by this kind of accent piece of clothing. And so for this event, people could show up, and we had these materials all set out, and they could, customize their own Neo Kishkemel. And so this is with Camila Bohemio, the curator. And so the idea was, after they kind of created these, they could, somehow integrate these into their lives, just to see, wherever they kind of move out into the world. And so they were kind of invited to photograph themselves wearing these artworks. So just kind of expanding like the possibility of these like connectivities. So this is a friend of mine. This is Sean Gall. He's a Los Angeles artist who lives in Rome now. That's his wife, Kirsten Rogerson. So this is me with artist Lily Mueller. So this is an installation that she had in Venice. So I was able to, visit and experience the Venice Biennale during this time. So you can see her installation in the background. This is a Russian artist that I met in Venice. This is me with Michelangelo in the back there. And I kind of like this also too. This is like a pyramid that's in Rome also too. So I'm always interested in these kind of unexpected cross-cultural kind of experiments or experiences, when you have the opportunity to travel. So yeah, so this kind of relates to like the project that I did with the LACC students. This kind of way of kind of expanding on like projects that have like an interactivity to them, or maybe ephemerality also too. So so another project that I did with actually other students. So this was at Texas Tech University. So I was able to do an interactive project with the fashion program and also the fine arts program, right? And it was interesting, they both on the same campus, but they didn't really spend much time interacting with each other. And so for me, that was one of the things that interested me most, like attending Cal Arts, was like the interactive, interdisciplinary kind of spirit. So this is like this is called Celestial Body. So this is like a glider sculpture. So another kind of floating, flying work of art. And so I was trying to tap into the culture of Lubbock, Texas, where Texas Tech University is. So this is also West Texas, right? So it's kind of related to where I grew up. I grew up in West Texas, but it's a different culture. But some of the things that they, have in common is the landscape. They're very windy places. So there's a lot of wind industries in Lubbock. And there's also which seems to happen a lot in the desert. There's a lot of like there was like UFO sightings, and they even had like a section of the U.S. Army, I guess during World War II, where they trained the glider pilots. So I was kind of incorporating all those elements. And so this is kind of meant to be like a DNA double helix, but it did kind of mutate a little bit, because actually, so what ended up happening is I invited, the community in Lubbock to donate T-shirts. And so, lots of times T-shirts can be like a personal kind of souvenir or artifacts, or maybe like the first concert you went to, or who knows. And so I asked them to donate them, and then we sliced them in half, and then we mutated them or kind of grafted them with another one. So that it was kind of like a mixture of these visual elements that you were seeing. So we created a canopy, and so the fashion department helped sew all of these T-shirts together. And then I worked with the fine art students, so they welded kind of the structure together. So we worked on that together. And so because there are like these factors that you don't really know what's going to happen when you're working with different people, the twists in the double helix, ended up looking differently when we actually worked them up to full scale. I made a model here in my backyard, but once we got there working with the students, it kind of changed, which I don't have a problem with. I'm open into that kind of experimentation of evolution. So these are like a few different versions of them. And so I actually worked with Rachel Anderson, who was one of the instructors there, professors in the apparel and merchandising department. And so actually what ended up happening, so this was up for 2 years. And then at the end, they removed the canopy or the skin of this sculpture. And then she led some fashion design classes for students that were in the foster care system. And so they actually took these t-shirts apart and then they restitched them and they created t-shirts again, right? So I thought that was really exciting and kind of honored that this project could kind of continue in that way. So this kind of makes me think a little bit, you know, the collaborative process that I've had here with LACC. So I actually started working with Eugene on, Professor Eugene on, and so he was looking at my works, and so I had started doing these digital prints. And so the digital prints were kind of meant more just to be, I guess, conceptual artworks, because I was trying to kind of make connections to places that I had traveled or maybe even places that I had dreamed of going that I hadn't been to before. So I started kind of creating these like, you know, like these are digital prints. And so they were actually printed out. But it allowed me to continue to make these kind of mutant sculptures with, you know, farm machinery. So these are from some photos that I took in Lubbock, Texas, because they have a windmill museum. So like these kind of windmills kind of remind me of farm machinery that my grandparents had on their farm. So I started kind of creating these like flying kind of sci-fi or these kind of futuristic or mutant kind of tableaus. And I don't know, I think Professor Eugene kind of was starting to kind of look at these. And so we started kind of developing ideas for this project that we did. And so, you know, so these are kind of digital in nature. So we thought maybe it was kind of a good way to kind of transport it over to the project that we did together. And of course, like, you know, during the, you know, COVID times that we're in, you know, this new ways of presenting an exhibition, right? And so during COVID times, I've actually had the opportunity to do a few interesting projects. And so one project that I did that was organized by Durden and Ray, it is called, let me bring it up here for you. Right, so it's called We Are Here, Here We Are, right? And so it was like hundreds of artists all over the Southland doing these installations that people could, you know, they wanted to safely walk by on their own, or they could kind of drive by. I had the privilege of being part of this this project, right? And you know, we can send you more information on this project. And so what I ended up doing, so these are two of the printed digital collages that I made. And so actually, so these are 4 feet by 8 feet. And so I placed them in the window. So this is my local gym, Snap Fitness. This is the owner, Alan Cutler. And so, you know, during this time, a lot of businesses were being, you know, sheltered, being shut down. So he gave me the opportunity as in a venue to kind of just, you know, participate in this project and exhibit these artworks. And I was hoping that, you know, reflexively also too, that, you know, because there's artwork here, people can maybe walk by and take note of this place and kind of remember this place. So when they could reopen, you know, there wasn't just this kind of a, you know, kind of lack of connection to this location. So this was, you know, the beginning of 2020. Right. So another project also too that was kind of making me think about like, I don't know, interesting ways of making connection like with digital technology is I was actually invited to participate in the 6th Ghetto Biennale, which was a biennale in Haiti at the end of 2019. Ultimately, I did not go in person. I mean, at the time, there was actually, you know, some political upheaval happening, but also at the same time, there was some family health issues that came up that I decided not to participate in person. But what I did is actually I communicated before going. I was communicating with some local artists who had participated in, in this biennial in the past. And so they were kind of giving me information. So I wasn't able to go ultimately, but what they did is, when we were discussing the possibility of me going, they were sending me photos of past biennials and like the hotel, where we would be staying and all those things. And it was really hard for me not to go. It was like really emotional for me not to be able to go at the very end. But it's like a decision that I made. And so what I ended up doing, I still did kind of like a suite of these digital collages where I was able to still have this kind of connectivity with the, with the place, with the venues, with the other artists that I was kind of talking with about this project. So in the background, so this is the neighborhood in Haiti where the event takes place. And then I also kind of interwove, images of downtown Los Angeles. And then these are like these stars. So in El Paso, one of the features there on the Franklin Mountains is there's this lit star. And so it's just kind of become like a kind of a remembered element of El Paso. So I kind of blended those together. Oops. So I did 4 of these. And so I call this Transportal Fierce Love Quartet, right? So this is with Gina Cunningham and Jim Ricks, right? So these are like details of the hotel where I would have been staying. There's like these images of airplanes in the background, right? These are like kind of like the tile and like burning tires that were happening at the time in the location, right? So this was like the project that I had proposed that I didn't get to do in person. And then, this is kind of like the background of the venue. So I was kind of thinking about, kind of continued ways to, I guess, share these types of experiences. So that leads us to the project that I did together with Professor Eugene Ahn. Eugene, do you want to introduce this, or do you want me to introduce this, or is there anything you want me to say? So I can kind of bring it up here. Are you with us, Eugene?
Yeah, Eugene is here.
Hi. You know what, Ismael? I think you are way more capable of introducing this project than I am. But I'm here, and you know what? I support you so much. I'm going to change my my background.
Oh, awesome, cool. Well, thank you so much. So yeah, so first of all, I just have to thank Alex Wiesenfeld and Elizabeth Prager for inviting me. So after Alex invited me, she said, would you be interested in doing a virtual exhibition in the gallery? So I said, sounds really exciting. So she introduced me to Eugene Ahn, who actually, I participated in another kind of virtual show called Artisan Poems, right? Organized by Suturo. You can view it on suturo.com. So it's organized and co-curated by Stephen Wolkoff and also Alexandra Wiesenfeld, and also, right, Professor Eugene Ahn also, did the web design for it. So I would check that out. So anyway, so yeah, kind of having known of his work a little bit, I was really excited to talk to him, and he started kind of bringing up these different ideas. And so I don't know where the conversation started, but I was kind of remembering this experience. So where I grew up, every time you enter into Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, or you're coming into the United States, there's these turnstiles, right? And these turnstiles, I never liked that experience. They just seemed kind of like rude objects. You had to kind of cram in there. You have to pay and you have to give permission to pass from one place to another. If you're not careful, someone else will like cram because they want to get through more quickly. They'll kind of cram you into that. So like you would crush your arm, right? So so I was thinking about those ideas and these I don't know, these barriers or dividers or kind of things that intervene. And so again, so this idea of the power of being an artist and just kind of ripping something out of the ground and repurposing it. So I kind of decided to kind of come up with this silhouetted design of kind of like, you know, if I could yank out one of these turnstiles and so it could just kind of levitate in the air. And so, you know, I kind of created this design that still has kind of like a satellite-esque spacecraft type of kind of design to it. So these are called revolutions generators. And so, you know, it's like a play on words, you know, like a revolution of something spinning, and also this idea of, you know, bringing about kind of new change and new societal change. And so, yeah, so essentially people can interact in this. So it's kind of another way to kind of continue with these kind of visual tableaus that I've been, you know, kind of thinking about. But people can, you know, experience these, but also you can go and you can click on one of these and they actually start to spin and they start to speed up, right? And then they kind of change from one background to the next, right? So, so you guys can just kind of watch that. So yeah, so it's just been launched. So, you know, all of you can kind of participate in this. So there's a few things that we're still kind of developing also too. So I think initially there was more of these revolution generators. So I think we're going to continue to add those. And so, it's been really exciting working with Professor Eugene's students also who've been developing this. So I really appreciate your hard work on this. And so there's a few more elements that are going to happen. So I think we're thinking of, we're going to add a few more of these revolution generators. And then also, you know, so you can change the speed of these. So you can speed these up, you can slow these down, right? So this is just like an idea for, so you can see this. Let me see. So this is my, so this is a version on Safari. So one of the conversations that I was having with the professor on is that it seems like, you know, so it's being developed for different platforms. So the way this kind of functions on my Safari platform is different than on Google Chrome, and it's a little different on my phone, and it's a little different on the tablets. So we're trying to kind of unify the kind of the use factor of all those different platforms. But we were just talking about this idea of also like this notion of something kind of being lost in translation, and my idea of like mutant practices. So it seems like, you know, the different kind of platforms maybe have different applications to them also too. So this is the version on Safari. So I'm gonna see how it looks on Chrome. But in the meanwhile, I don't know, Professor An, is there any things that you want to kind of mention about this?
Well, I'll just say that, you know, one of the great things about your work is that, you know, it's conceptual, but it's also very material. You know, I really appreciate hearing the story of how, you know, you referenced your childhood experiences of discovering these contraptions, you know, in your family, on your family's property, and them being otherworldly. And I think it's a perfect explanation of why the things that you imagine in your work feel so real, and it seems to be part of the criteria for you. Just being able to work with you on this project, it was very interesting to work with somebody who demanded things to be very conceptually rigorous and very out there, but also very real at the same time, and something that people could engage with. So I think, you know, there was quite a lot of things that went into making this a worthwhile project for everybody who was involved.
Thanks. Actually, I'm going to let me bring up the project again really quickly. And so I guess one thing I just want to note, I mean, I guess one of the images that is included. So so a friend of mine, Fernando Sanchez and Alfonso, he actually went to, you know, the U.S.-Mexico Gateway, and so he actually took some photographs of the you know, so you can actually see one of these. Let's see here. Do I need to be made host again? Well, my screen share is not. Oh, here we go. Or Eugene, can you bring it up on yours? For some reason, the project's not showing up on my.
Which one do you want to bring up? The revolution generator?
Yes.
Let me do that.
Thank you. As we're doing that, is there anyone that has any questions? Any comments?
Don't be shy, y'all. Do it.
Where do you live?
I live in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. So yeah, I've lived in Los Angeles for many years now. And like I was kind of saying, once I kind of moved to LA, a lot of my ideas started being about, you know, where I grew up. But yeah, I've lived in Los Angeles for many years.
Hola, ¿qué es lo que más te gusta de México?
¿Qué? ¿Otra vez, por favor?
Claro, ¿qué es lo que más te gusta de México? Lo que
Pues
más te
todo,
apasiona.
pues todo, la cultura anciana. So she asked me, what do I like about Mexican culture? I mean, I love everything about Mexican culture, but actually one thing, I think that was like a game changer for me is when I first started undergrad, I did terribly my first semester in college. I had like 4 Fs and a D. And I was taking these classes that I'd taken in high school, and I was so bored. And to get my GPA up, I decided to take a drawing class. And you know, I thought maybe that would kind of help me out. And I met this artist, and he said, you know, people always ask you, what do you want to do when you get older? So he said there was nothing else that he was meant to do but be an artist, and it was very gratifying, but it was very challenging. But he didn't recommend it for everyone. So when someone tells you not to do something, what do you want to do, right? You're going to want to defy them. And so actually, so my stepfather at the time, he was from Pachuca, Hidalgo, which is kind of near Teotihuacan, where the Aztec pyramids are. He kind of made me realize at that time, you know, even growing up on the U.S.-Mexico border, you know, so when I was first born, I grew up speaking Spanish and English equally. But then once I got into school, my reading and writing kind of, you know, it was more predominantly English, right? And so when I was in undergrad, the only artists that I really knew about in terms of art history were Pablo Picasso, Andy Warhol, and Norman Rockwell, right? And so, so when I entered college, the first time I met my stepfather, who was from Mexico, he kind of mentioned how there's this ancient culture in terms of like the civilizations there, you know, the Mexican muralists, these movements of arts, you know, that were kind of culturally appreciated. And so that's one thing that I, you know, really love about that, just that heritage it's super old. And maybe that's something I think about when I am, because I work as an educator also too, and I've worked in a lot of museums. And I think people going to museums and the concept of art, you know, the United States is a young country, right? So those are maybe new ideas for our country. So I don't know. So it was really helpful to have contact of such an ancient civilization, but it's, you know, it's part of where we are, you know. So of course, you know, this at what time was Mexico, right? So yeah. Sí, entonces esa es sí, la cultura anciana y artística de México. Me fascina.
Gracias por responder.
And
Any
then
other questions?
Ismael, there's a question in the chat from Paola, and I'll read it, and then if Paola, you want to chime in, go for it. How did you come up with the idea for Constellation Chihuahua?
That's a good question. I mean, I think part of it is just this opportunity to like work with different audiences, and sorry, it looks like I'm strobing here. So I mean, just going to Chihuahua, Mexico, working with the people there, seeing what's available there. Oh, I guess one of the things that I was interested in also too. So like where I grew up, when I would go to Ciudad Juarez, right as you walk over the bridge and enter, so there's a lot of like these kind of touristic shops that people call artisanal shops, but I, you know, consider them fully fledged artists. So you walk there and you get to, definitely you know, see people, you know, hand blowing glass and making these really cool miniature sculptures, you know, actually painting, metal smithing, silver smithing, you know, and then you go to these shops and there's like rows and rows of piñatas, right? And so I think maybe there's a connection there. You know, these traditional 7-star piñatas, which are supposed to signify the 7 deadly sins, right? To me, they always look like, you know, sci-fi satellites. And so I think piñatas actually, in one way, it could be how I kind of describe like the birthplace of mutant practices. So I was visiting one of these piñata shops with a some cousins that grew up in Colorado, and we got there and they said, man, Mexican craftsmanship sucks. And I was like, wait a second, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, look at that Spider-Man. That Spider-Man looks all effed up. That doesn't look like Spider-Man. And look at Bart Simpson, doesn't look like Bart Simpson. And so this kind of light bulb went off in my head that that these kind of these creatures or these objects already had their own sense of existedness, right? So it seems like lots of times we're always trying to, when we categorize things like, where does this come from? What percentage is from this culture? What percentage is from that other culture? And I like that these were already kind of fully fledged. And when I was in grad school, I had a critical studies writing professor, and I like how he kind of celebrated visual art, because he said, like, visual artists, lots of times when, you know, when they're making a work of art, it's like they're in the moment, right? They don't really know all the ideas of what they're making. There's a process, and it's just, so they're actually being in the moment. And he said he felt lots of times when people are doing like maybe cultural criticism, lots of times the things that they're discussing has already happened like 20 years in the past. So I kind of like that these mixed up piñatas that we're seeing were made in the moment, and it was just kind of like this merge, or this, not even a merge, it's just the existence of, you know, of what they were in that moment. And so, yeah, so I guess maybe I was thinking about that a little bit also too, in terms of, yeah, possible forms for the project of Constellation Chihuahua.
Ismael, I had a question.
Sure.
Well, first of all, thank you. This has been so awesome, and I'm just like so thrilled. I was thinking a lot about play. I think, you know, the interactivity of your swing, of the colors, of sort of these garments. And something that I was thinking a lot about was you're kind of inviting people to come into a gallery, which usually is kind of a very visual experience. You walk in and you look at stuff. And instead what you're doing is going, no, you're going to come in and you're going to swing, you're going to play, you're going to become part of the process. Like, you are the art also when you come to your show.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I like that element. And I guess the concept of play also too, I kind of like, it might be related or unrelated or related in my own mind. I mean, I like the concept of like Dada, and that art can have the absurdity to it also too. So like working in museums, and even before that, like when I was trying to articulate to family members like what it was to be an artist or what art is, and like always an ongoing reconsideration. For me, I like the idea in Dada where there was like absurdity was also, you know, part of making a work of art. You know, this kind of undefined act or kind of moment also too. Yeah, so you know, so yeah, hopefully, like you said, that sense of play or absurdity or something that's like phenomenological or just an experience, so they can kind of make their own decisions on what the work is doing. And I guess one of the things I'm interested in also too is like, you know, just experiencing working in museums and working, you know, interacting with different cultures, how different cultures can look at the same painting or the same concept of art and have different ideas of what is supposed to be a strong work of art. And so like giving tours in LACMA, yeah, I'd give tours to people with the 20th century abstract paintings, and people still get angry towards abstract paintings, and that kind of fascinates me. You know, but I think, you know, some people, they feel like the highest form or skill in painting is, you know, the Renaissance, you know, getting 2D materials, making it look three-dimensional with perspective and shading. But during the same time in Japanese screen painting, like their images are flat, and they're not really that interested in photorealism. And they're interested in more art that has essence than what the reality is, you know? And so I guess, yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm interested in terms of the idea of play, I guess, or even this notion of, what is it called? Is it the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle or something like that in science, when you set up an experiment and you're trying to learn about like the natural causality of things, that we're human beings and we're kind of intervening on the natural aspect of it. So we don't really get the full experience. And so, yeah, I don't know. So I guess that element of play is some way to kind of rupture that, I guess, somehow. So
very cool. And then we have some more questions from students. So
sure thing.
Roberto asks, what do you think about graffiti?
I love graffiti art. I did some graffiti art when I was younger. but actually, I mean, text is something that I also use in my work also too. Actually, behind me, you can kind of see like a text piece that I did. And so actually, I also work in so I have the opportunity. So I'm also, a teaching artist. I also am a painting and drawing instructor at the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. So shout out to the students from there. Also teach drawing at Long Beach City College. So shout outs to those students. And then also I've had a opportunity to work with the education department with LACMA. And so recently I've been giving actual virtual workshops, and we've been working with the graffiti artist Chaz Bojorquez. And so, yeah, so I mean, I definitely love graffiti art, and text is something that I've also kind of used in my work also too. And so I guess one of the things that interests me about text also too, I guess working in museums, it's always interesting to see which people go and they want to read the plaque or the placard about what the art is, or they want to visually experience it. And so those are interesting ideas to me also too. And then also kind of growing up where I grew up, like different languages kind of happening at the same time was something that always impacted me too. And even having relatives tell me about frustrations that they had in terms of education, like a couple of generations before me, where, if they were of Mexican descent, how they were being made fun of by people in Mexico that their Spanish was failing, and how they were in the United States and they were being made fun of because, their language, their English wasn't quite on par. So yeah, so definitely, this idea of language also something that I've considered in my work too. So
I have another question regarding that year of school where you said you didn't do so well.
Yeah.
What was going on in your life that you couldn't focus on schoolwork? Was it your creative mind? Was it your creativity? Did you feel out of sorts? I go through this with my daughter, and now she recovered out of that phase. What's going on with you?
Yeah, basically what was happening is just like a mixture of things. It was, I had these high expectations of what the upper echelons of university education were supposed to be. And then when I got there, it was a lot of the same classes I'd taken in high school. It was immaturity also too. So I went to undergrad in the same city where I grew up. So too much partying, right? Also, and it was just too convenient. I had friends and they went off to school in other places. So you have to kind of adjust a new place. So I think it was kind of a mixture of those things, and not quite knowing either, I guess what I wanted to study. So for me, being an artist, it was always like a core of who I was. And so I guess at that point, what I just, had to kind of, growing up, I'd always read about artists. That's something you could do as a career, but I never really defined myself as an artist. So I guess when I declared myself an arts major, it's like I was, finally declaring myself an artist. And so I guess maybe things just kind of fell into place. And then that was just kind of my core crux, where I kind of felt I was able to come of age and like, this is who I am. This is how I see the world. So let me see how I can wield my creativity or the way that I respond to the world and any of the others hoops that I have to jump through. So if I have to take this class that I'm not that interested in, right, what can I bring to it that's going to kind of make it more exciting? Or what can I do to, I don't know, use this experience to also kind of fuel me as an artist? And so I think that's something I tried also too, because a lot of my high school students, they're trying to decide if they want to go to an art school or they want to get a university education. And for me, I think it was fortunate for me that I got a university education first, because I, studied philosophy and languages and mathematics. And I got like a really good conservatory type of training in terms of the arts. And then when I got my master's degree, then I could kind of focus on more conceptual ideas and kind of independent study and critical theory and things like that. So yeah, so that was kind of my trajectory.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good thing.
Thank you. And then Ismael, we have a question from Lisa, and then we'll have a question from Jonathan.
All right.
So Lisa asks, you have used found materials and clothing as well to embed different stories. And Lisa, feel free to unmute and chime in if you wish.
Yeah, so actually there's a project that I did, and I think on my website it's called New Worn Memories. So I think in 2008 or so, 2007, 2008, I was invited to be in this exhibition called Intersections or Intersections. And it was curated by Barry Markowitz. And so essentially what it was bringing different artists at an intersection in Studio City. And so to get artists to work with local businesses. So I ended up working with I wanted to work with a local laundry dry cleaner, but they didn't want to participate. So I ended up working with a vintage clothing store. And so what I did is I actually, there's these jackets that I made out of canvas. So for me, like canvas was this kind of way of using traditional painting materials, but it has a transitory aspect of just kind of life. You can wear it, it goes wherever you go, you get mustard on it. It becomes, part of the layering of the artwork. And on the back, actually, I embroidered the story of my stepfather, who I mentioned before, and how he actually came to the United States. And he actually was sent to the United States as a punishment, actually. He was misbehaving in Mexico, and where he got a college degree in business. And then he opened up a string of dry cleaning businesses. So it talks about that history. And so what I did is actually, I went to vintage clothing stores and I was looking for a suit jacket from the 1970s and then from the 1980s. So in the 1970s, the first suit I wore was when I made my first communion. So it's like these concepts being placed on me and I was supposed to dress up for this certain occasion. And then in the 80s, when I came out to Los Angeles as a teen to go to a wedding and I could choose my own style and, see if I could, I don't know, find a date or someone coming out to Los Angeles. So I had an opportunity to kind of have, choose my own style a little bit. So actually I went to vintage clothing stores. I found those jackets. I actually hired a pattern maker. And so they actually did patterns made on these garments. And then I hired sewers. So then out of canvas, they actually sewed these jackets. And then I hired some embroiderers also. So I kind of layered all these elements. And so it's kind of interesting too, because the two jackets that I designed were based on some mystery person's dimensions. And so one of them, the person must have been real barrel shaped with short arms. And so hardly anyone can kind of wear these jackets. So there's only, like a specified person out there where these jackets really kind of fit. And so, so that was like a project that I did in terms of, the different layers of kind of using found materials and then transforming them in a different way. So.
All right, thank you. Jonathan, you want to go ahead and?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I ask this question to like every artist I come into contact with, just because I'm really curious about everyone's process. And the main question is, when you start something from start to finish, there's always that like area in the middle, that time period in the middle where you are not sure if you want to keep going because you're afraid. You're like, I got to a good point, looks great, but I feel like something's missing, or should I stop now? I'm afraid I'm going to mess this up. Like, how do you know when you want to stop that? Do you, like sometimes you got to take a step back and be like, this is good. If I go any further, I'm just going to end up, scrapping the whole thing because I kind of put a little too much. So, I mean, just as advice or from your own perspective, when is that? How do you, figure that out?
Well, this piece that's behind me, it's actually based on a quote by another professor that I had, and he said, I always like this quote, and his quote was, "Artists have a higher threshold for chaos," and so that's something I share with my students also too. So that always happens in your mind. You have this idea of what you want it to look like, right? But for me, that's what the art happens. You have this idea, you try to make it real in the world, but there's these physical limits to how a material is going to function. So you have to kind of honor that, enjoy that, and then also see, maybe something even better can kind of come out of that. But that happens.
It changes.
What's that?
Like it changes during your process. Like you have this picture in your head, and then like as soon as you get into it, you're like, oh, this isn't what I wanted, but I kind of like the direction it's going, even though that's not my original.
Right.
Is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, lots of times it's looking really great, and then all of a sudden you think you ruin it. Oh man, you're all pissed off. You go to bed, you go back in the studio, look at it again. Oh, it wasn't so bad. You get another idea, it's looking great, and then you screw it up again.
Yeah.
So you do. So you start finding your own personal, I guess, instinctiveness of where you think it's where it's that balance between what your idea is, and it's kind of exciting. And then also for me, this concept of mutant practices, it allows my work to continually evolve also too. So sometimes I've used a project that I've shown before, but I'm able to kind of change it in some way, so the ideas continue to kind of also grow too. And so that kind of helps out my practice in terms of being like a conceptual artist that, I have these ideas that I'm working with, and then, so the idea comes first, and then I try to kind of figure out what materials are going to kind of work best to kind of manifest that. But sometimes, that's the excitement of being an artist. You don't really know until you kind of experiment with these things too. So yeah, for me, this
kind of like see what happens.
Well, I mean, there's some parameters, right? There's some ideas that I have behind it, you know, but then, you know, that's kind of allows me to figure out how I can continue to develop it, you know. And so these collaborations, like working with Professor Eugene's students and him, like these other we had a conversation recently, and so the considerations that people that and the class had kind of brought new ideas to the table that I wasn't thinking about also too. So those are also factors also too. And you know, just talking to different artists too. You know, you can have a virtual studio visit or a studio visit too. It's always great to yeah, have them make comments, you know, to make you think about things you weren't thinking about. And you know, when you have the opportunity to share your artwork, it's out in the world, and you can hear how people are responding to your work in ways that you never really thought before. So those are all, I think, factors that you can over time internalize, and it kind of helps you make decisions, you know, when you're in the, you know, in the moment of your process.
Absolutely. I kind of had a little bit of a second part, if you don't mind, if that's okay. Also, so say you finish with something, you're super happy with it, then you kind of feel like, what's next? You know, you kind of go to that almost like a lull in creativity. You kind of feel like that last project that you did was really great, and you almost stress yourself out for your next project. You feel like, oh, I did so great, like that was one of my best things I've ever done. And then you feel that stress to create something new. You kind of don't want to do the same thing that you've already done. You want to create a new piece. You also feel pressured to create something just as good, and you're afraid of that, like, you know, letting yourself down, that you're like, oh, this is not going to be as good. Like, how do you handle that, like, stress? How do you deal with those lulls in creativity? How do you like I guess inspire yourself during those time periods? Because I know there's always people go through those lulls.
Yeah, I would just say enjoy the process, right? Maybe not to try to worry so much about the end product, you know. And like when I would have an
artist writer's block, you know.
Well, when I would have a bad like a meeting with when I was in grad school with visiting artists or faculty, they would say, well, the good thing is, you know, you have time to make more art, you know. So if that's one project wasn't working, you know, hopefully, you know, art takes a life to develop. So if one thing is, you know, not working, then you know, give yourself a break and maybe try something else. But yeah, so hopefully your best artwork is not going to be your best artwork. There's always going to be more that you're going to add to it. And another thing that I've always liked also too is going when they have retrospective of artists' work, right? And you can see like an unfinished piece, like from the past. It's kind of cool because you can see these artists that are supposed to be, you know, like the world's top artists, that they, you could see, you know, when they were experimenting. So you might see something that wasn't maybe as exciting, or maybe wasn't what they were known for. And actually I have a lot of artist friends that have long, and there's, you know, they still make art and they're still very important artists, but sometimes they get known for a certain time period, and then that kind of annoys them, you know.
Like their own personal renaissance, essentially.
Well, you know, it's like other people decide this is like the historic importance, so they kind of focus on that, you know. So it's just, you know, I would just keep making artwork, you know, just kind of, you know, just keep making marks, you know, drawing your sketchbook, maybe try like a new material, you know, what would happen if you kind of, I don't know, invert it somehow, or what, you know. So just, you know, we were talking about this element of play, kind of be playful, listen to music, have conversations with friends, have them look at your work, you know, that's part of the game. You just got to figure out continuous ways to kind of inspire you. So if you're looking at a work and you're satisfied with it and it's not inspiring you anymore, then do a sculpture instead of a painting next time, or do a music piece, even though you're not a musician, or, you know, try to write some poetry, or, you know, just to see what happens, you know, so.
Love that advice. And then I think our last question is going to come from Lovepreet. And so, because I think you have to teach after this, right, Ismael?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so go for it, Lovepreet.
Hi, thank you. I think you led to it in your last answer about collaboration, but I was just noticing that a lot of your work is collaborative, and I was just wondering how different it feels doing something that's so intentionally collaborative versus doing something that's like, I don't know, purely solo. I don't know how you could define purely solo at this time, but yeah.
I think, yeah, so I mean, like I started off drawing, right, when I was, you know, like as a young child. And so that was always kind of my way of I mean, drawing kept me out of trouble. Anytime like I was sad or depressed or angry, instead of getting in a fight or causing problems, right? I had an outlet. I can, make a drawing, and I felt I had some kind of control over the universe. And the cool thing about for drawing, you could also like, hide secrets. You could put secret messages in there. You could kind of express personal things about you, and then when I started taking painting in undergrad, I started thinking about that a little bit too, also because I wanted to be able. I was in a bigger world where I was working with other artists, and I kind of wanted to be able to kind of connect with them a little bit more. So I kind of felt through my painting, I was kind of hiding behind the canvas a little too much. So to kind of continue my visual, I guess. Skills in terms of being an artist, I started becoming more interested in well, I've always been interested in film and cinema, but I started doing like video installations. And so when I do video projects, there's these different parameters. We have to go out, maybe interview people, maybe get permission to film things. So that kind of brought me out into like a larger environment where I had to kind of interact in that way. So I always kind of continue to go back and forth to both of those things. And I think, ultimately I'm a shy person, but when it comes to art's my passion. So, it kind of, allows me to, I guess, have a little bit more personality. And so the thing is, so I mean, we're all human beings are social creatures also. So we need to, kind of interact socially also too. So that kind of forces me to kind of interact with other people and maybe keeps me open to different possibilities, to different ideas. And so there's like a balance. And, don't get me wrong, when I do collaborate, I still have a lot of my own kind of personal traits or ideas that I kind of want to stick to, but, working with other people, it kind of has you, kind of continuously reconsider that and kind of make decisions, what you want your work to be about. So there's a certain element that your art has to be in there. Then you have to tell the rest of the group, or, that's part of the idea. It's like, it's about this. So this has to be in there, but, it opens up a lot of different kind of possibilities, so.
Hey, Ismael, do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay, the last one, but I thought that Emmanuel asked a really good question. Emmanuel, do you want to ask it in person if you're still here? Well, maybe Emmanuel isn't here anymore. I guess the question, if I just paraphrase for sake of time, was what would be your advice for a young artist? And would you have done anything differently now looking back on your career?
I don't know. I mean, I try to be in the moment and keep moving forward. So in terms of being an artist, young artist, it just depends what you want to accomplish, like if you want to be like a billionaire artist, there's, I guess, paths, so, it's good to somehow, somewhere down the line, get publicists or people that kind of market you to kind of put you in that kind of track, if you want to be a teaching artist and interact and kind of inspire other, generations of artists. I mean, I think it's possible to have a combination of all those things. So basically, as a young artist, you just, you got to have faith in yourself and not give up and just keep moving forward. And even like whatever you consider a failure, like this, that's, artists can have that kind of impish aspect of play. So even if it's, I don't think it's possible, maybe perhaps, to have a failed artwork, unless it's a painting that falls off the wall and injures someone, right? But I don't know if it's possible to have a failed artwork because it's going to lead to something else. So in terms of things in my past that I would change, I mean, I can't really. There's only certain things you can control and can't control. But I think even like the things you consider failures kind of make you who you are, and you hear that all the time in artist stories, because something happened to them that maybe is tragic, and people have this idea that artists are supposed to have like a tragic past to be whatever important artists. I mean, that's not true, but lots of times you hear that like something happened in an artist's lifetime that kind of influenced them, or they grew up in a certain period of time. I mean, just all of us, the times that we're living in, we're impacted by the times we're living in, we're affected by the technology that exists, and that's just going to make us who we are. So I know in the past there was like certain grants and things that I applied for that I didn't get, and sometimes it still bothers me, but the more artwork that I make and more connections that I have with people like you, I can say, well, these are things that I've accomplished, and so that doesn't really matter as much anymore. And so the thing is, and things can always recycle also too. So people that I didn't get along with in the past, I've met them later on, and then, oh wow, we're on the same page, and then something good thing happens out of it, and then we had a shared past, even though you know, we were maybe rivals at one time or whatever. So yeah, so so hopefully that helps.
Wow, such good advice. Thank you so much, Ismael. This was just the most beautiful, inspiring lecture.
Well, my pleasure. I mean, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, you know, if anyone has further questions, you can contact the school. And I look forward to, you know, hearing further from those of you that have experienced the exhibition created by Dr. Eugene Ahn and his students. And also we're trying to develop an Instagram app. So we'll have hopefully have an iteration of this that can also be used through Instagram. So yeah, so stay tuned for that. So yeah, keep being awesome, everyone. And yeah.
Thank you.
Till we meet again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.